got to be a really big boom for this episode, Dave, because it's bombastic this week, what we're going to be talking about.
Yes, it is.
Welcome, everybody, to the Omniverse Comics Guide podcast. We are your Omniverse Comics Guide guys. I'm Eric. That's my pal, Dave.
I'm Dave, allegedly.
Allegedly.
To the law.
Dave, how's it going, pal?
Yeah, all right, thank you. Just trying to keep up on top of all the reading business at the moment.
Are you having fun in the reading business?
Yeah, man. But there's like stacks of stuff I want to get through at the same time. So everything I see, I'm going like, oh, I'm sorry. I'll get to you.
Yeah, I know, right? I know, it's true. It's true when you got the collection such as yours or even what you see behind me. But it's fun when we get around to these episodes where we can kind of zero in on something like, okay, well, I'll read that stuff. So no books on the shelf can feel bad because we've got a mission.
Yeah.
Right? You'll get your turn.
We'll get to you.
We'll get to you. Everybody that is with us on the Twitch, thank you for tuning in. As always, we appreciate the viewership weekly and the hang. And at the same time, hit us a rate and subscribe when you're on YouTube. We appreciate the love. Don't forget, I always mention this, the omniversecomics.guide. You got to mention the website. That is a website that my friend Dave beautifully works on week after week, and he makes reading lists and comic reviews. There's a section for getting kids into comics. We've got podcasts, interviews, collector item specials, you name it, it's there. If you want to get into comics and find your way through, because you might feel like, man, there's a crossover here. What happened in between these stories? We are the guys with the guides. There you have it.
Nice. That sounds really useful. I think more people should try it.
Definitely check it out. But every Wednesday, we'd like to do top 10s, creator spotlights, like this week. Top 10 Mark Millar comics.
Are you going to explain?
I'm going to explain why I said it like that. So this week, I wouldn't usually do this. There's not a lot in here for those watching.
You can't make many mistakes at all.
No, you can't. So it's enough, though, to make me feel it. This is my little shot glass. I have a habit of saying Mark Millar. A lot of people do.
A lot of people do.
But it's Mark Millar.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say Mark Millar anymore. So every time I say Mark Millar, I'm going to take a shot.
Yes.
I'm trying to stay behaved. That's the point. I don't want to have to take a shot right now.
If I miss it, please drop it in the chat. Eric, drink.
Yes.
I will say Miller time.
Let us know. Miller time. Yes. There you go. All right, Dave, what do you think of Mark Millar? Almost caught it.
Did it count? I don't know. I think it counts. If we let you off with this one.
Okay. What do you think of Mark Millar as a comic book creator?
Ooh.
There's something in there.
Do it. Do we have to wait until you've done it before we carry on, or are you just going to knock it back?
Just go ahead.
Okay. You should prep one ready so you can knock it back when it happens. Not if, when it happens.
Okay. I got some water here too.
Woo. Don't mix your drinks. So, yes, there's some stuff he's done that is just so in your face. A lot of his style is kind of in your face comics, isn't it? It's shameless. It's weird because in real life, he's super polite apparently and doesn't really swear or anything.
Really?
Yeah, apparently he's quite a devout Christian. But when you read his comics...
What?
Apparently. But I don't know how true that is, but that's what I understand. If you read his comics, you don't get that impression. It's very...
Not at all.
Anti-establishment, very anti... It's just, let rip at everything.
His comics are the type that, for me, make you say, are you even allowed to do that?
Wow, yeah.
Your turn to go first for the Mark Millar episode, top 10.
Okay, I'm gonna. We've had a bit of a role reversal in more recent episodes. I used to go all like, "Oh, I'm gonna hit you up with some randomness," and you'd go like, "Why do I always pick all the obvious stuff?" I feel like I'm picking the obvious stuff lately, and you're picking the stuff that's more left field. So my very obvious, award-winning start to this one. My first choice for a Mark Millar recommendation is Superman Adventures 30 to 31. So it's a two-parter, as you can tell, because it's 30 to 31, mate. Equals 2. From about the early 2000s, I think it is. I bought my daughter the trades So she's got them. So I have managed to read them. Most of the issues are kind of one-shot stories, but this is a two-parter, and the cover is very dark for a Superman Adventures series. So Superman Adventures is set in the DC animated universe, DCAU, and it's all about it's all stories set around the Superman series. So I think the issues happen in and around the episodes of the series. So this one is about Superman taking an exploding antimatter machine up into space before it blows up and destroys Earth, or a chunk of Earth. And when he comes back down, but then he discovers he's actually been gone for 12 months. And what happens in that 12 months? And as he's starting to piece it together, some very random things have been happening. So he realizes like Clark's been gone as long as Superman, and his parents aren't necessarily there anymore. Lex Luthor's got a very different status in Metropolis, but the mysteries just keep on growing. And because this is one of those things that even though his Superman Adventures issues won awards, I still think there's a lot of people that haven't read them, so I don't want to spoil it.
I haven't read them.
They're great stories. I've read a few in preparation for this to try and choose, and I could have just done a Superman Adventures by Mark Millar top 5. They're really great comics. I mean, that's the thing. He won a, what was it, was it a Harvey or an Eisner? I'd love to see a Superman Adventures omnibus. I know we're not doing an omnibus recommendation thing tonight, but those comics are so much fun, and they're good, really clean, done in one.
How much did he write? How many issues of those?
I don't have that to hand, but it's quite sporadic. It's not like necessarily a solid run. There are batches of issues. So they've done some. Well, he did the following issues: 16, 19, 22 to 31, 33 to 38, and 41 to 52. But he wasn't writing it from the beginning. So there are a variety of creators on that series. But it's just lovely stuff. Yeah. But the thing is, the mystery you think you're getting with this two-parter, it just doesn't stop. It's very inventive. I think this is where Mark Millar, even though he became really famous with The Authority, this is where he was being noticed first on Superman Adventures.
I don't think that's a super obvious choice. That's a pretty deep cut.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to go super obvious.
We're flipping it.
We're flipping it. Since you mentioned Superman, I'm just going to go with Superman, and that's Superman Red Sun. It's a Superman Elseworld story. It's quite popular. Superman landing in Russia as opposed to Kansas, USA. Is Superman a product of nature or nurture?
Yeah.
And this book kind of explores that, because he makes the USSR become a superpower because they've got the Superman, and they take no prisoners. But he is completely loyal. He's not the dictator. He knows his place amongst the order of things. So it's just an interesting take of like, what if these heroes were real? What if they were affecting policy and they could change history? And it makes you understand, like, this isn't just about the fantasy of superheroes. Oh, there are consequences to people having too much power. It makes you kind of see almost like the geopolitical aspect of like, oh, that would be very interesting what they would do with this child. And then, of course, there's an aspect of, the role reversals of how Batman plays his part, how Wonder Woman plays her part, how Lex Luthor, what role he plays in this reality. For some people, they're not always a big fan of the story as they're reading it, because either it might be, I don't know, too obvious, a little bit too like, okay, Superman is a Russian, like people might get bored of it, but it's getting to the end and seeing how full circle the story is. Mm-hmm. Again, how come no one's ever thought of that?
Well, going back to that whole thing. How has no one ever thought of it? I think there's two things you say in there. One is that the other part of it is not just how come no one's ever thought of it, but it's how you then play it. Because someone could just go, yeah, what a great idea, and then just milk that puppy. Don't milk puppies. It's not a good idea. So someone could just do that and make it just really simple and just kind of crass. But he can be crass, don't get me wrong. But he's pretty smart about how he plays it. And like say, he plays it in terms of how it would actually happen. Imagine if this was happening. Otherwise, what's the point? It's just a throwaway piece of trash. He's going to give you a story. Yeah. And that's why Superman Red Sun has also been made into an animated film. It's a really popular story, but there are plenty of people that haven't read it because it's out of continuity. So my number 2 tonight is, I'm going to actually pick up on that fact as well. There's some nice little points about Millar and the way he works. So he inspired my reshuffling of my comic collection, or my book collection. Not that you can tell, I am trying to be strict with myself. He doesn't have any crap on his shelves. He doesn't want anything he doesn't love. So, it's very hard for comic fans not to try and be completist and have a full run of everything. Or I have to start from the beginning, and it doesn't matter if I like it or not. I need it on there because he doesn't do that. He just wants the good stuff on his shelf. So that kind of really represents him. So when I go to people's houses and I look at their shoes, I know what you're about. So even if you haven't read the beginning of The Authority, and I'm not as big a fan of the first 12 issues of The Authority as a lot of people, I much prefer the Millar issues. But he does write things in a way that it's accessible enough for readers to hop on later. So yes, I'm going to talk about his opening arc from The Authority. It wasn't the storyline I was going to do, but I had this sudden urge to read it, and I thought, if I just get that in, then I'll jump ahead to the other one. I thought, no, this is the one I do want to do. So it's the 4-part storyline from The Authority 13 to 16. It's called Nativity. It's one of the many formats it's collected in is the Absolute, which is this nice oversized hardcover.
Ooh.
Someone's a posh boy. So this is when he starts the series with Frank Quitely, as we mentioned earlier, on the art. The Authority originally started as Stormwatch, which went through a massive evolution when Warren Ellis was writing the series. So it ended up becoming like there's a Black Ops spin-off team from Stormwatch. So there are multiple teams, and their focus is completely different. It's not just let's do tons of knockoff characters on a massive team anymore. They tried to make it more focused. And then they went, let's take the characters that we're all actually liking from this run and turn them into essentially a hardcore JLA. It's almost like Squadron Supreme with no rules. So they're not taking any crap at all. Like the violence is up, the aggression is up. They're not taking any shit. And
it's the rated R Squadron Supreme.
It basically is, yeah. I mean, you've got a Batman and Superman, which is the Midnighter and Apollo, respectively. Yep. They're very much analogues for those two characters. They're very much their own characters as well. The way they deal with things is very, very different. I'm not sure if Jack Hawksmoor really relates to anyone, because he can speak to cities. It's not really like anyone else. So there are some characters that have got their own thing. Again, I don't want to spoil it if you haven't read The Authority, but this picks up on the second story arc, the last story, written by Warren Ellis and drawn by Brian Hitch. So this picks up almost straight away from there, and it deals with the fallout of that. And someone is trying to obtain the infant that is the spirit of the 21st century. This strange little goblin-like guy. And to do that, he's got his own knockoffs, and they're very clearly based on the Avengers. There's a team that's very clearly based on the Defenders and on the X-Men. But it's not just about what if the super violent JLA met the super violent Avengers. There are some great one-liners in it. He's very much from the school of the kind of 80s blockbuster cinema with the one-liners and the unnecessary violence. It's very much that kind of feel to it. So to spoil one moment, the Authority turn up to this fight, and the Doctor is first on the scene, and he's on his own. Like, he's screwed. He's up against their version of Giant Man, and he's about to get stomped on. And then the Authority show up, but they've just been to a party on their massive ship in the Bleed, and they turn up, cool. And they've been drinking all day. One of them says, "What kind of superheroes turn up drunk?" And Apollo just says, "The dangerous kind," as he flies through his head, and you can see bits of his head blow. Like, it doesn't hold back, and it's those sweet little one-liners that you just go like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. I don't care. It makes me feel like I'm 13 again, reading these kind of books. So I don't care how silly it is, or how immature it feels, or how just stupidly macho it is, because it ultimately isn't that macho. Because this is just so much geekery and fun. It's great. Yeah,
it needs to be mentioned. Like, we speak about certain Mark Millar stories so frequently that the obvious ones might not be mentioned. But I'm really happy that you brought up the Authority work, because it is the back end of a series that was already getting acclaim with the Warren Ellis Brian Hitch tandem,
Yeah.
right? Taking what you like, the Stormwatch stories and building this whole other thing that they had going on, which was, I feel like it's almost like this was training ground for the Ultimates. Did the
It very
Ultimates come
much
after?
was. Yeah. So
Right?
when Warren Ellis and Brian Hitch launched the book, their aim was to make widescreen cinematic comics. So that's why all the
Yeah.
panels are all like
Yes.
that on every page. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
So that was the style they were going for. It was meant to be big blockbuster superhero comics. So this is
Right.
before you were really seeing big blockbuster superhero films. You know, X-Men wasn't
Right.
out yet. And part of the reason why it did so well was because DC bought Wildstorm. So they had that
Right.
DC money to back up the promotion. So it was already getting acclaim. And yeah, it was
Right.
great. Like it was a really good, strong comic. But I think the thing that made it work when Miller jumped on was he added that level of humor. And it just made
Right.
it such a dumb, fun, ultra-violent,
And
but still
quietly,
relatively thoughtful on occasion
Yeah.
read.
my number 2.
Your number 2.
This is, again, when I was kind of on the fence with Mark Millar, whether or not I was like, do I like him? Do I not like him? I know he did Civil War. I know he did that, Ultimates. But I gave this a chance blind by. And the one that I went with was Starlight. Have you ever read Starlight?
Never.
The one thing, again, about Mark Millar is the wish fulfillment of his comics. Whether it's uber violent or just like the fantasy element of it. And this goes full sci-fi fantasy. But there's a lot of heart to his characters. So this, the main character's name is Duke McQueen. It seems like a
Feels
movie.
very pulpy,
Like, why?
doesn't it?
Right, very pulpy. He was 40 years ago, kind of like an Adam Strange. Duke McQueen was a space hero who rescued a world from tyranny. But when he came home, got married, had kids, grew into an old man with nothing but his memories, until one night when an old Sparky rocket ship descended from the heavens and called him back for one final adventure. So he was this guy who saved an entire civilization, an entire planet. He went missing, came back, nobody believed him, and he went on to live a regular, good old American life. And this story takes place when he's later on in his years, and he's alone now, right? And his kids are kind of like, oh, Dad, you and those old stories. You know, you're still living in that adventure world of yours. And he goes on one final adventure again. So it's got that Adam Strange, Flash Gordon, pulpy feel, as well as a little bit of that Indiana Jones swashbuckling aspect to it. Again, it's that sort of wish fulfillment from being a viral young man that is the hero of the story to one day, one more time, one more adventure. And it's got a lot of heart to it as well. So he finds a way of making these full-on action, non-stop, full force, buckle up, eat the popcorn while you're reading these books. Like, it's just everything is cinematic, but there's always those moments where it's like, oh, nice. Like, that's nice. Well, as silly as all of this was, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, when you look at his, like, the stuff he would have been reading that inspired him to do Superman, it would have been the pre-crisis era. Same with Grant Morrison. So as much as those two do some really dark stuff at times, really twisted, nasty stuff at times, they still love that truth, justice, and the American way, dusty old comics kind of thing. And there's a reason why that stuff gets to people. There's just something really true about it, that pure adventure.
Yeah, because he and I'll probably mention it in some of the other recommendations today, but he has this fine line of taking like a very human emotion, experience, or even stage of life, inserting that into like the main plot of the story. Like, everyone gets old one day, everyone loses someone they love, whatever it might be. We all think about these thoughts, and puts you in a point where it's not too hard to feel the compassion as the reader, right?
Yeah.
And it comes back, and it's like, oh, you know what? I needed that little bit of escapism, but it also brought you back to the ground. Like, don't forget, this is also what it all means.
Yeah, lovely. Well, I'm sold, man. I want to read that now. Thanks.
That's the point.
That's the point. God damn it. Okay, I'm gonna hit you up with my number 3, and this is where it gets pretty obvious. All right. So it was kind of mentioned earlier. It's this one.
Tell me about it.
So
I was trying to find it, and it's not available to order.
It's tricky, but it is coming out again. Actually, you told me this, didn't you? It's coming out in library edition format from Dark Horse, along with Big Game, which is the sequel that also includes a lot of other Millarworld characters. Later in the year. I think it's October or something, isn't it?
Yes, I think so.
Now, of the stuff that we were talking about earlier, where he tends to cut loose, and relentlessly so, and you're reading it going, how didn't the comic company you did this with shut this down, or go like, we're going to get in so much trouble? So it's the kind of stuff that Vertigo wouldn't run. This is based in a world where a kind of a bit of a loser type character finds out he's the son of one of the biggest supervillains in the world. So not only is this a discovery that that his dad was a supervillain called the Killer, but that there are supervillains and that there were superheroes, but it's all been suppressed. So everyone's forgotten, because the supervillains run the world. So the Killer is killed, and then they get his son, Wesley Gibson, and they bring him in to the fraternity, or whatever you want to call it. Essentially the secret society of supervillains, but in the wanted world. And they make him the new Killer. So he has to unlearn being a loser. Now, if you've seen the film version, but not read the comic, it's very, very, very different. And I'm one of the few people that quite likes the film version. Because it's, to me, that's another come home hammered from the pub film. Like, don't think about it so much. But the curve in the bullets, that doesn't happen in this. None of that happens in this. I don't even know why. It's like the first 10 minutes are the comic, and the rest of it is not remotely. It's very different. So, as you go through, there are bigger conspiracies, and like, who killed the Killer? And why are they still, like, if they run the world, why are they sort of hiding now? And why don't they come forward more and kind of just run riot? Because isn't that part of the fun of being a villain? As it goes through, like things change rapidly and drastically. It's a 6-issue story. Again, I don't want to reveal too much for people that haven't read the comic or have only seen the film. The art is by J.G. Jones, who, again, is a perfect choice for this. And he throws tons of references to other villains in, like, from other universes, to the point where you're going, you've just basically drawn Brainiac. That's Brainiac.
You can't do that. There's no way you could do that.
But the thing is, that's not even the worst thing they do. Some of the things they call each other in this alone, I can't say, because we'd be shut down on YouTube. That's how bad some of it is.
Now I want to read it.
It's that's the part. I think it's because so much time has passed. Like, this is 20 years ago when this came out, pretty much.
Right.
And things have changed a lot in 20 years. So reading this now, before I would have read it going, okay. Whereas now I'm reading it going, oh, you can't say that. It's like everything's so different. But it's still, if they haven't edited it, I don't think they're going to edit the version that comes out. It'd be interesting to compare it, actually, and see if it's vastly different. I don't think it will be, but you never know. To the Omniverse again. We are going to look at our most watched episodes for July of the podcast stroke video. Ooh. Surprisingly, all right. Jelly spoons. Number 5, the creator interview with Mr. Jim Shooter, editor-in-chief of Marvel in the 1980s. Number 4, we've got the top 10 comic book maxi series. Like your maxi series?
I like that episode.
Jump on that, Mo Flipper. Number 3, Deadpool versus Wolverine comic book face-off. 5 Wolverine choices versus 5 Deadpool choices. Number 2, incoming for August 2024. And number 1, incoming for July 2024.
Ooh, interesting.
So it's all about the incomings at the minute. People want to buy books.
And hopefully the things we've recommended, if anybody's given them a shot, it's been worth your while and worth your dollar. Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Don't want to steer you wrong.
Don't give us grief if we're wrong, because sometimes we read them as well and go, oh. It happens.
I'm going to stick with the Millarworld books. So this one is Huck.
This was one I quite warmed to.
I've got a real fondness for the story. Raphael Albuquerque art adds to it because it's basically if Superman never left Smallville and just was a gas attendant by the name of Huck who did nice deeds for the sake of doing nice deeds. Like, that was the way he was raised. very Superman-like, but he didn't make it public. He didn't bring attention to his little neighborhood. He didn't go and try to save the world. He just minded his business and helped people anonymously. It's like the purest human you could find, Huck.
Is he less
And
smart? He's not as smart as Clark Kent, or am I remembering that wrong?
I think that he's presented almost as what if Superman was Forrest Gump? It gives you that sort of feel, but then it becomes very much a conspiracy spy. What's this really all about? But there's heart to the story. There's a lot of heart to the story.
With heart, don't you? You soft git.
Well, I do, but I feel like he kind of finds that little nugget to be the lead of the story.
Yeah.
So like this one is like just being nice for the sake of being nice. And can it take you too far? But at the end of the day, what is it that really brings this main character? Like, what is he really all about? How come no one's ever thought of that? Are you allowed to do it? And then at the same time, like there's a sappiness to it with all of the violence. Like this can get very violent, very scary at times. Because have you read it recently?
No, it was when it came out in trade, so I haven't read it in a long time.
Okay, so yeah, in preparation, I did a whole weekend where I just ripped through all of these books. Didn't rip them literally, but read them very fast. And again, there was moments where like, oh, I forgot. I remember how the story was, but I forgot the beats, the points, what the issue, what happens, issues, and again, there's that wish fulfillment aspect of I just want to do good for the sake of doing good, and his power is being able to he's strong, but he's able to find people. Because of that, some of the requests he gets, he can't say no to because sometimes they're finding my pet. Something as simple as like, I've been missing my dog for a week. Here's his collar. He's got something to be able to find them. We're missing our daughter. This is the crux of the story, though, is that he becomes a public figure. What happens? What happens when, his business is out there? So, again, very fast-paced, very fast, lots of action, lots of violence. There's the espionage, conspiracy thing that exists between rivaling nations and all that kind of stuff. Check it out. It's a very simple story, but the Raphael Albuquerque art is just right. I don't know if, take a look at that cover one more time.
Look at all those 5-star ratings. I think I gave it quite a high rating as well. I think I gave it 4.
Very easy read.
Nice. Lovely stuff.
I'm a sap.
Really good recommendation. It's a great book. Okay, my number 4 is not what I was expecting. I was actually working on a really lengthy, an 11-part story that he wrote that I'd never read before. And I got so far through and I just thought, I just want to read this other story. Because it was reminding me of stuff. I'm not going to say what it is because I may come back to it later. But this is a 3-part storyline. It's from Ultimate Fantastic Four 21 to 23. This is the story that introduces, and this is, again, there is going to have to be a spoiler in this because it's hard to talk about without mentioning it. This is the story that introduces the Marvel Zombies. So a lot of people, when they've seen the Marvel Zombies episode of What If, the animated series, they'll jump on the old Robert Kirkman 5-issue collected edition and they'll read that story. But it actually begins, that very same zombie universe has its beginnings in Ultimate Fantastic Four 21 to 23. Now, this was a bit of a weird one. Because at the time, the way they sold it was the Ultimate Universe is going to meet the mainstream Marvel Universe. And there was so much backlash. People are just going, no, you saw you'd never have the Ultimate Universe meet the mainstream Marvel Universe. And that, you're not the House of Ideas anymore. Wasn't what anyone was expecting. So the preview image, I think, had Ultimate Reed Richards, who was much younger, facing mainstream Reed Richards. It's like, here we go. Oh, the two of them are going to meet. Doesn't quite play out that way. The universe they unlock, as you've probably figured out, is the Marvel Zombies, alternate reality, and it's just how it plays from there. This is incredibly fast-paced. I read the whole thing in about half an hour today. It's quick. Yeah. There's not a huge amount of dialogue. It's all full-on, high-octane pace. The art is by Greg Land. I know a lot of people don't like Greg Land. On the downside with this, he gives Johnny Storm the most annoying hair of any comic character in history. I almost want to shave the comics page. Get my razor on it. Change his hair. The colouring though is beautiful by Justin Ponser, who sadly is no longer with us, but he was a fantastic colorist and he really brings the issue to life. So if you're not a huge fan of Land, it does improve because that coloring is so good. It's so strong. It's a great issue. It's superheroics with zombies thrown in, but it's quite different to the Marvel Zombies series, which was illustrated. So it was written by Robert Kirkman, illustrated by Sean Phillips. It's a very different vibe, and it's done with it more of a comedy edge. This is horror, and it plays out really nicely. But yes, incredibly fast. There is also a sequel a few years later, and that's Ultimate Fantastic Four 30 to 32, which deals with the fallout of something I don't want to reveal, but it is the follow-up. So the ultimate version of the Frightful Four is essentially the zombie Fantastic Four.
Right. Okay.
And that's the story. But they don't just stop at that. Why stop at that when you can throw in Doctor Doom? So
right.
Not as strong as the crossover storyline, as it was called, from 21 to 23, but it makes up part of the grander overall story. So if you're going to read Marvel Zombies, start with Ultimate FF 21 to 23, do 5-issue Marvel Zombie series, then jump back into Ultimate FF 30 to 32, and you've got your full picture there. Ultimate Fantastic Four has a couple of highlight moments, but it never finds its feet in full.
I'm going to go back to a little bit of heart.
Well, why not?
Back to the Millarworld. Why not, right? Let me stick to the theme. So back to Millarworld. Again, an Image comic, a one and done. Like I said before, I really like how he casts the right artist for the book. And it seems like they have as much fun drawing his stories as he does writing them.
Yeah.
And I think this one here is catered to Greg Capullo.
I've never read that. I've wanted to for ages. Has anyone else read this? I'd be really interested as well. No, I'm not going to listen to Eric, obviously, but
I don't want to listen to him talk about art.
Can someone
anymore.
else do this now?
Right?
He keeps talking about emotions and shit.
And it's got that Greg Capullo aesthetic because it's like there's the back cover. That's what you're dealing with, right? So it's got that little horror element, that monster element to it.
I love the way with your accent as well. Horror sounds like whore. I always find it confusing.
Horror.
I like horror comics.
Horror. I like saying horror better. But everyone will know that I say that one word with an English accent. Horror. All right.
That was like
and
an
I've only had one
experience.
shot. Right?
What's the writer's name again?
Mark Millar.
Damn it.
So this story is about Bonnie Black. The plot is basically, where do we go when we die? Who and what is waiting for us? This is Bonnie Black's afterlife. Who is she in this world? And what the hell is that?
Oh, what is that?
Going back to that whole style that Millar has of taking a very human element that we all kind of experience and think about from time to time. The near-death experience. That's what this is basically about.
Oh.
This person who's lived their life out is now in the old age home, as it were, and she has a stroke. And as she sees the white light, she's welcomed back to this world of, is it a heaven of her making? Is it a afterlife of her imagination? So all the people that were in her life, whether it was her best friend, her dog, they're all playing a role in this world.
Ah.
And there's humor too, where if it's played seriously, it's even more funny.
Right.
Where like one of her pets is like, I don't like that bitch. Right? So use your imagination of like what animal that would be, why they would feel that way, and it adds to the humor if you play it straight. But yeah, it's full on adventure. It's kind of like it's absolutely wish fulfillment, silly fantasy storytelling. If you're a fan of, I guess, that sort of Star Wars swashbuckling style, but also very high fantasy. There's the whole element of like having an oracle and you know, the one who can practice magic, and like her afterlife has rules of like what certain things are and why.
Right.
It's an interesting way of telling that story, which we all kind of imagine. Recently, I was reading J.M. DeMatteis's story from the Multiverse, where it's actually similarly about like the heaven is that of your own imagination. What you believed in, you're going to receive it,
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So this one is more like, why does she have to? This doesn't seem quite like a peaceful thing, because it's like you're in Lord of the Rings in this book.
Uh-huh.
So that's part of the fun. And then there's an element of, again, the character progression where it's like, in order for them to become their full, complete self, there's something holding you back. What is that thing that's in your way? If that makes any sense.
Not remotely what I thought it was going to be about. Bear in mind,
Yeah,
I'm judging it
and
by the cover. I was actually just looking at the cover going, I really love the covers on this series. But that's
it's
not what I thought it was going to be about.
the adventure and the action and the violence is what you expect.
Yeah. So you kind
right
of do
at the same
get it.
time. You do get exactly what
You get more.
the cover. You get a little heart.
Oh.
It's not quite horror.
It's so weird. Okay, so to round off, my fifth choice for the night couldn't be more obvious. To the point where I'm going to give you one chance to guess it.
I think the most obvious choice would have to be Civil War.
Oh, got my cable. Yeah. I think the tricky thing with this, in my mind, is I've read this event, I think 3 times. But I've read it as a whole event 3 times.
Right.
So it's not just Civil War itself. And that's where I think, like, you know, I chose it kind of going, I can't not, because I love that whole event. I think it's one of the best events Marvel have ever done. I know some people get really funny about people being out of character and things being a bit forced. Prime example, Reed Richards says something in a Spider-Man tie-in and the Fantastic Four tie-in, it's kind of the same words, that contradicts something that happened in right about issue 334. Off the top of my head, I don't know. There is a little bit of that, but you know what? It's a massive event. He was so unwell, I think, when he was working on it as well. So he was desperately trying to get this. Yeah, he was desperately trying to get this thing finished. It was like the worst possible timings to do a massive crossover event, and it was the first one of its kind that Marvel had done in years. Because House of M was bigger than Avengers Disassembled considerably, but you could also read House of M as an 8-issue series on its own. You didn't need to read any of the tie-ins, or you could just read the tie-ins relating to the characters you liked. Civil War, you can read the 7-issue thing, but the more you read, the bigger you realise this event is, and it works. Yeah. There's very little in there that doesn't work, or at least doesn't make sense when it's all put together as an overall story. Now, the story's full on action, but do you know what it's also got? It's got a nice bit of heart to it. So Captain America is, of course, the guy that opposes the Superhuman Registration Act that's introduced when the New Warriors accidentally kill 600 people in a small town. And we're kind of looking at Cap's side and the people that agree with him that masked heroes have their place in this world against Tony Stark, who's Iron Man, obviously, but he comes out as Iron Man in this, but not in the actual main series, and that's the thing. It's kind of hard to separate the two in my head. But he comes out as Tony Stark again, because he'd already done it a couple of years earlier when he saved a dog. Everyone had forgotten, conveniently, and then he confirms it, and he's leading the pro-registration side, and Cap's leading. It's pretty much that part is essentially the same as the Captain America Civil War film in many ways, but this is vast. It's so much bigger. There's so many more characters, and the way that it changes the face of the Marvel Universe is just massive. They introduced the 50-state initiative with all these different, essentially, Avengers teams in each state, and they've all got to be registered and they've all got to be trained. So what springs from this is a huge number of new teams, whole different lineups. So from a Fallout perspective, it's massive, and that's even just in the main series on its own. The spin-offs have got tons. I don't want to go into the spin-offs right now because we're just talking about Millar. But yes, Civil War, if you probably, most people have read it at this point, so it's not necessarily a recommendation no one's at least heard of before. But if you haven't, give it a go. It's a great period in Marvel history. It was one of those times when they would do an event like this and it would feel pivotal and it would feel like there was permanent change. To me, it's the marker that I don't think anything's quite hit again since. There have been some good ones that were up there. I still like Secret Invasion a lot. Siege was an appropriate ending to that whole New Avengers era, which this is part of, but nowhere near as good. Civil War is the standard bearer.
Nothing is as consequential, I don't think, as an event. Maybe I'm missing something because you have Secret Wars and you have what DC has done, but I think, like you said, this was now, when did that come out? 2005, 2006, and around there is when it came out. They essentially based a lot of a movie universe around the fallout of this story and what it accomplishes, right? It inextricably changed the characters in Marvel forever, and may have even, I don't know if it happened before or after, but I feel like after this, the Avengers were the main team in Marvel. Now, what inspired me to think of this creator for the spotlight was when we were doing our Wolverine stuff. I was reading a lot of.
I meant to say, yeah.
Right. So I it's not that it's being left out because it isn't great, but I did mention Enemy of the State, and I've been talking a lot about Old Man Logan lately. I know it's the Jeff Lemire stuff, but my next pick isn't Old Man Logan, although I love it. I read it. I remember one sitting from the minute I bought it, opened up the book. One sitting, I read all those issues. It was so much fun. But my pick is going to be Spider-Man from Mark Millar, Dodson's during the Marvel Knights. This is issues 1 to 12. Why is that your pick? Everything you expect about a Spider-Man storyline, a lot of those elements are found here. What I liked about it was that and I think I put this in a Spider-Man starter kit perhaps, with this particular storyline, because I feel like what Hush is to Batman, I feel like this story could be to Spider-Man, not in the same way that
it was inspired by Hush,
and it kind of has those beats.
Yeah,
it's 12 issues that are broken down into 4-part storylines that involve Aunt May going missing, and Peter Parker. Obviously, everything shuts down if Aunt May is number one, right? Yeah. Which is, for me, sometimes annoying. Cause it's like, I don't mean to sound cold, but like, just die already. Like,
she forgot her pills for a reason, Pete. Just let it go.
You're like, she's 90, buddy. She's 90. I'm not saying you don't want. Yeah, it's not to say you don't want to rescue your aunt, but anyways, all the other elements. It's like a Spider-Man's greatest hits. There's a way of working all of the different villains in it. There's a way of you having those big moments with those villains as well.
Yeah.
And even sort of certain relationship dynamics, because that's the one thing we often talk about. It's like, how does this guy always get the hot girl? Like, and not just like the really hot girl. Like, how did you get Black Cat and Mary Jane? And there's moments where there's like, they're in a 3-way conversation, and you're just like, who is this punk? He got bit by a spider, and then he can't, like, is it a magnet to hot chicks?
Yeah, the hard luck superhero. Take the word luck out.
Right. Change it with another word that rhymes. But anyways, this is it's full of adventure. It's full of that Mark Millar bombast, if you will, but it with using Spider-Man and his cast of characters and villains in the Marvel Knights era. You got away with a little bit more that you might not have gotten away with in the regular title, if memory serves. Like, I think of Daredevil,
a slight edgier feel to it, just to draw in those name creators, because Marvel weren't getting the name creators as easily at that point, and that's what Marvel Knights did.
Yeah. If you enjoyed Batman Hush and like the way it's a sort of primer, if you will, to that character's universe, this kind of serves in the same way, where it catches you up on who people are, why they're important, what the history that it's almost, it explains it to you along the way. Like, okay, I'm caught up. I'm invested.
Yeah.
Every issue finds a way to do that. He does it here pretty cleverly. I don't think it's the most groundbreaking story that Spider-Man's ever had, because at this point,
pretty.
And again, you got to talk about the artists that he picks for these books. It's always appropriately casted. And when the Dodsons aren't on, and it's Frank Cho, and I quite liked his issues within this. There's a lot to like, especially if you're a Spidey fan. In my opinion, I'm a big Spidey fan. I wanted to give him a shout for this particular episode because it gave me a reason to reread this book. That was the other thing too. I'm like, I want to reread that book, and that'd be a great reason to do it. Because I loved Enemy of the State, and I loved Old Man Logan. I'm just like, I could keep reading some Mark Millar. We did it again.
Whoops.
Whoops, we did it again. Shout out to Mark Millar.
Here he goes.
Cheers to Mark Millar.
Cheers to Mark Millar. In celebration, I'm going to show you my big hairy nuts. Look at those.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you for sharing those with us.
It.
Great way to end the show. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us. And I'm watching it on the delay on the Twitch, and I just see your hairy nuts again. Thank you for everybody with us on the Twitch. Those that watch on the YouTube and are listening on different podcast platforms, give us a thumbs up, rate and subscribe, or share it with a friend if they like comics. And, of course, the OmniverseComics.guide website. It's your one-stop shop for everything that we got going on. Check it out. We're going to make more of these.
Oh, there's plenty more to come.
Plenty more to come.